Hi, this is Matter of Interpretations, Americans in Crisis, with your teen host, Sydney Tucker. And today we're going to be discussing homelessness again. And before we do that, I'd like to say a prayer. So if you could, please bow your heads, close your eyes. Dear Lord, thank you so much for all you've done for us. Lord, lead, guys, and direct us in this conversation, that a lot of people would have a lot of information that they may not have had. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, so we have a person here today that I am so excited to hear from, Barbara Smith. If you would, can you please just, give us your, well, she's councilwoman, but just give us like what you're about, what you do in our community.
Right, so first of all, let me thank you for asking me to be here. I'm honored. I'll never forget the day that I met you at the Girls Leadership Conference and got so excited, and you were excited and so was I, and I knew great things would come from that encounter. But thanks for that kind introduction. So I am Barbara Sexton Smith, the Louisville Metro Councilwoman representing District 4 here in Louisville, Kentucky, and we have about 762,000 folks that live in our city, and each of our council districts represent about 29 or 30,000 folks who live in the area. And my district represents the entire central business district and all of downtown Louisville, so it is seen as the economic driver for the entire Commonwealth of Kentucky, because 70,000 people a day drive into the downtown area to go to work. And then also my district is the surrounding neighborhoods. So we have our Ohio River border to the north, and then all of the Phoenix Hill and Butchertown neighborhoods, and most of the Russell neighborhood, and a little bit of the Portland neighborhood here in the historic West Louisville area, a little bit of the California neighborhood. But as you travel up east, I've got all of Smoketown, all of Shelby Park, and all of Paristown Point, Meriwether, Fort Hill, and a little bit of Snitzelburg, and a little bit of Irish Hill, and a little bit of Germantown. So also, since I've been in office, I've learned that there are some neighborhoods within District 4 that a lot of folks don't think of as neighborhoods, but I do, because it is our homeless camps. And our homeless camps are sprinkled and scattered throughout the county. However, the vast majority of them are located in District 4 and around District 4, because most of the services and programs and sheltering services available for those experiencing homelessness are in the downtown area and surrounding neighborhoods.
Most definitely. And what do you feel are the root causes? What's happening? Since there's definitely a lot of homeless going on.
Well, I think the root cause of homelessness first starts with, we must recognize constitutional rights in the United States of America. And this nation, long before it was formed into a nation, was inhabited by our Native American brothers and sisters who lived beautifully off the land. So there are going to be a number of folks who always have and always will choose to live on the outdoors off the land, and that is the constitutional right of someone living in America if you choose to do that. However, there are many folks in our community and throughout the Commonwealth of Kentucky and the United States that are experiencing homelessness, and it's not by choice. So the root causes for folks finding themselves experiencing homelessness at any given time, and it's not their choice, I think it has a whole lot to do with several federal policies that are in place that trickle down then to the state level and then to the local level. So first of all, in recent years, the federal government has reduced funding for affordable housing and for services for those experiencing mental illness. That federal funding has reduced by more than 90% in recent years. So you take all that away and you do not give anything to replace it. So the second policy that is in place that is a root cause is the fact that the minimum wage in America right now, and in many states, including our state and our city, is $7.25 an hour. And you simply cannot live on $7.25 an hour. That policy must be changed, and I would love to see the business community in America stop fighting that, stop opposing that. And if the business community would lead the charge to increase the minimum wage to what I call a living wage, and that number would be about $15, possibly $17 an hour, then what you would do is you would establish a much more stable workforce. because the business community is saying their number one problem is getting a stable workforce. Well, if you are ripping folks away from their homestead and you want to pay a wage that doesn't give them enough money to provide food, clothing, and shelter for themselves, much less a family, how can you expect to have a stable workforce? So then if you look in Jefferson County, here in Louisville, Kentucky, a 2-bedroom market rate apartment will cost about $821 a month on the average. In order to be able to afford that, one must be able to make $15.79 an hour. Well, if you look at the number of people working in Jefferson County, on the last labor market report, there were 666,000 people working, receiving a paycheck in Jefferson County, and 254,210 of those people made less than $15.79 an hour. So what I just told you, people are what we call cost burdened. Cost burden is a term that Housing and Urban Development, HUD, uses that says if you are spending more than 30% of your gross income on your housing and utility, then you're cost burden. So how are you going to afford food and clothing and transportation? You know, what if you want to have your own car? And then you got to afford the car insurance. And depending on where you live in Jefferson County, your car insurance, based on your zip code, might be 2, 3, or 4 times higher than someone who lives in a different neighborhood. So these are very complicated policies that must be addressed in our nation, and I'm hoping that we're going to address that on a local level as well.
Definitely. So where are the laws put in place?
Well, as we think about laws in Jefferson County that are set in place that would affect those experiencing homelessness, if you go back to the fall of 2017, we had a really unfortunate experience here in Louisville. There was a gentleman that was discovered living in a homeless camp by himself right in the center of downtown Louisville, and the weather was getting very, very cold, and someone discovered him there, and he was an amputee. And unfortunately, we got to him, and it was too late because gangrene had set into his wounds where his amputation had taken place, and it ultimately caused his other leg to have to be amputated. That caught a lot of people's attention, and we realized we've got to do something different in Jefferson County. We're better than this, and we must find ways through the laws in Jefferson County to help those experiencing homelessness. So the Louisville Metro Council, under the leadership of a particular ordinance by Councilman Bill Hollander, put forth the Homeless Protection Ordinance, which is in place in Louisville, Kentucky. And what that ordinance and that law says is if we are going to clear a homeless camp, we must post a 21-day notice. And that 21-day notice then must be given to the Coalition for the Homeless, which is a large organization, partnership organization of many homeless service providers and homeless sheltering providers in the area. And that notice gives the network of folks trying to provide services 21 days to go to the particular camp that's going to be cleared and try to build relationship, if they haven't already done that, with the folks living there, and try to get them to move into sheltering, whether it's temporary, or to get on a pathway to move into permanent housing. What we discover is many of the folks are either suffering from some type of drug or alcohol addiction, so we are wanting to move those folks, if we can, into treatment. But as we all know, treatment does not work because someone wants it for you. You must want that yourself, and you must choose that yourself. So you can't rush treatment, and you can't place it on someone. But we want to be there when someone is ready to say, I'm ready. You know, take me to whether it be the healing place or wherever one chooses to go for their recovery work. And then also, not everybody wants to go inside to a temporary shelter. So we set that up and we try to get folks to move. Now many folks will choose to simply move to another camp, and that is their right to do so. And we cannot stop them from doing that. second part of the homeless protection ordinance here in Jefferson County is if we don't want to give the 21-day notice because we think there's a health hazard because of the amount of human waste and excrement that has been compiled in the area, or because of the large number of used hypodermic needles for drug users. If that's starting to build up, then we ask the Louisville Metro Health Department to conduct a health inspection. And if the Louisville Metro Health Department determines it's a health hazard, then the 21-day notice does not get posted. However, we come in and we let folks know we're going to be cleaning this camp for health reasons. That doesn't happen very often. That is not the preferred pathway. The preferred way and the more humane way to do this is with a 21-day posting. And then another piece of legislation that's in place in Jefferson County is an ordinance that regulates camping. And you will see no camping signs posted at different places throughout Jefferson County. So if you're walking down the bike path or riding your bike down as you start leaving downtown Louisville, headed down the Portland Canal, for example, there used to be several campsites right down that hillside before you got to the canal or to the flood wall in that area. And I've noticed they've put no camping signs there. So folks that are experiencing homelessness, they know not to go in that campground. However, if there is a vacant piece of land and it's not a piece of property and that's privately owned and there's no camping sign, they can put up their tent, lay down their bedroll or their pillow. And if they set up their domicile, that homestead, and it's there for 48 hours or more, then we cannot move them. That's their homestead. So that is why you will see some folks camping on a sidewalk or camping out in the open. Many folks are choosing to live under the viaducts. And the viaducts are the sections where you see Interstate 65 coming through Jefferson County. And as you see there where you have St. Catherine Street, Kentucky Street, Breckenridge Street, full College Street, Jacob Street, those are all running east and west as they're coming underneath I-65 as it's moving through toward downtown Louisville, and then where Jefferson Street is. That became a huge homeless campsite along Jackson Street, Preston, and Jefferson in recent months. So folks are living there because it's sheltering from the elements. It's automatically rain control. And a number of the camps were back in the wooded areas, and there are some folks living peacefully in homeless camps in wooded areas that feel very comfortable and very safe. However, if too many folks get into the neighborhood of a homeless camp and there's too much drug activity, we're seeing human trafficking in and out of these camps in some of them, then it becomes a dangerous setting. And unfortunately, we've seen some fires. One man died, and his tent was set on fire several months ago in what we call the CSX camp. And most of the camps have names, and they're well known. And interestingly enough, the homeless camps tend to have a hierarchy similar to a neighborhood. You may have a neighborhood that has a neighborhood association, the president. You may have a neighborhood association that sets the rules that the neighbors are going to live by. Well, it's not a lot different in a homeless camp. They're just not formal, and they're not written, and you don't have a website set up for that. But there will be folks that will extend invitations to others that live in different camps that are being cleared to come live in their camp if they're known not to cause trouble.
Okay.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. And I go to scripture when I'm trying to figure out my pathway forward. It seems to settle me, and it seems to have all the answers that we need, whether we go to the Old Testament or the New Testament. But if you look at the story of in Luke of the Good Samaritan, what are you going to do on the road to Jericho? And which character are you? Which character am I? Which character is the city of Louisville? And who do you want to be? Do you want to be the priest that passes them by, the Levite that passes them by? Or do you want to be the man from Samaria that stops to help the man who's on the street disheveled and dirty and penniless and starving. And what did the man do? He put that man up on his donkey. We don't have a donkey today. We have a TARC bus, we have a taxi, we have our own cars, or we could walk someone somewhere, and took him into the hotel. And what did he do when he got to the innkeeper? He told the innkeeper, put this man up, and when I come back, I'll pay whatever it costs. So we've got to find ways in Louisville, Kentucky. I think we can be a national model, not that that's what we're trying to be, but we should be leading the nation in how well we take care of the least of us. And we already have a reputation for many programs and services for those experiencing homelessness. And am I worried that folks are going to come here because of our great services? No. I welcome them. Please come. Please come, because there's room at the inn and we have a place for everyone. You know, it's a crime against humanity if we don't do this together.
Do you believe that homelessness is a cycle?
Well, homelessness can be a cycle. It can be a cycle for an individual. For example, I've met a number of people who are experiencing homelessness, and when I talk with them and after they're comfortable with me and start sharing their story, either they became homeless because of stolen identity, I hear that a lot, and then they became evicted from an apartment. I hear it because they say, I suffered an illness for an extended period of time and then lost my job as a result of that, so then I got kicked out of my apartment, or I couldn't afford my mortgage anymore. Or a number of people find themselves experiencing homelessness because of domestic abuse and domestic violence. And some folks find themselves in this situation because they've been incarcerated for whatever reason. You know, our county jail is licensed for 1,793 beds in the jail. Well, we're averaging about 2,200 people a night. We need to be rethinking why we are locking people up. Are we locking people up because we're mad at them? Are we locking people up because of their potential or committed violent crimes? We really should think about that. And then the institutional oppression that has taken place in this country for decades. You know, I'm a proponent of legalizing marijuana, starting with medical marijuana, but I want to legalize all of marijuana because we have legalized alcohol, and we seem to be perfectly fine with that. It's legal in our country at the age of 18 in some places, 21 in others. But how many people have been killed due to alcohol-related accidents? We know those numbers. We know that data. People get locked up for drunk driving. They get out. They lose their place. They're in addiction of alcohol. They find themselves homeless. Is it a cycle? Absolutely. So do we lock them up and keep them in the jail? No, they need to be into a recovery facility when they're ready. When they're ready. And then some folks will say, well, I was able to get back on my feet and got into an apartment, and then bad luck happened again. Mm-hmm. So I think it can be cyclical, but I wonder how much of it institutions and society is responsible for the cyclical nature. Do we feed? The one question is, do we feed the cycle? What are we doing as a society to feed the cycle of homelessness? And what are we willing to do to break the cycle? You know how hard it is to break a cycle of any type of oppression.
Right, most definitely. And with the cycle, I was wondering if you could give me your feedback on this, but the mental health hospitals, is maybe how they're trained or something, but actually like 25% to 1/3 of the homeless population have mental health issues.
Exactly, and so I think that the folks that are working in mental illness, the field of mental illness, many of them are extremely well trained. You know, we have our Kent School of Social Work here at the University of Louisville and the University of Louisville School of Medicine. You know, they're nationally renowned programs, and the Department of Psychology. So I think that folks are trained to work in that. However, go back to the very first thing we were talking about. What's a policy that's in place? Federal funding has been slashed drastically. So if we're not going to be providing the federal funding and state funding that is necessary to help those experiencing mental illness, then we're not going to be able to have enough residential units set up that have 24-hour services available for those experiencing mental illness and security on site. You know, for example, if we're trying to move toward what are some solutions and how could we be helping these folks, Wellspring is an organization here in Louisville, Kentucky, and they have more than 100 units throughout the community, and it may be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 units in each setting where folks experiencing mental illness from any perspective may choose to be living, or their family may request that they be placed there. And I've toured many of those facilities, and they are trying to operate as close to a normal living environment as you can possibly get that would be safe for the individual who's there needing treatment and service, as well as the other folks that are living there. And my understanding, and based on your statistics, we probably need 10 times, if not more, number of facilities just like that. And why wouldn't we do that? Why would we not want to build these facilities and have the folks that are trained to care for the folks experiencing these challenges to be there with them? Because you could walk with me sometime into the homeless camps. I haven't been today. I spent most of yesterday visiting all of the viaducts that I mentioned to you under 65 because I was checking to see if everybody was okay because of the major disruption that happened on Monday. See, we had a camp clearing following a 21-day notice this past Monday. Mm-hmm. It was Jefferson Street and Jackson and Preston. So what happens when you have 20 or 30 or 40 people who've been camping in an area for a long time and they're all of a sudden moved, if they're drug users or suffering from severe alcoholism, then they're going to become very upset and anxious, and they're not really knowing what to do and how to collect their belongings and where they're going to move to if they don't want to go inside to a low barrier shelter or to another shelter. So what do they know best if they're suffering from drug addiction? Where does their comfort come from? Mm-hmm. It comes from the needle. So we had 7 overdoses that I know of this past Monday, right near the Jefferson Street camp, and ambulances were rolling in and out. I was there during much of this, and because folks didn't know what else to do. And to my knowledge, no one died, but there were overdoses. Some of them respond to Narcan, and some do not.
And with these sweepings, I'd like to say, I guess what will be the purpose, per se?
Oh, the purpose of the homeless camp clearings that are done here based on the 21-day notice, the purpose is long-term strategy is to try to keep the network of programs and services for those experiencing homelessness, to keep that network integrated and working together so no one falls through the cracks and no one dies in the street in Louisville, Kentucky. If you're looking for one overarching objective. So that's where we start the conversation. But we're better than that. So then the goal would be get the outreach workers coming in and working with the folks during the 21-day notice to see who's willing to go to the Volunteers of America and participate in one of their programs, who's willing to go to the Salvation Army and participate in one of their programs, or to go to Wayside and start working with one of their programs, or to go to the Healing Place, or the plethora of other services that are available.
There's a lot of services.
Oh, there are many. We have many services. I would argue we probably have all the services that we need available in Louisville. They're really starting to really understand each other more and work with each other very well.
That's good.
And then, so the purpose would be to connect people to services so they can get on a path to recovery and healing and ultimately be living indoors if they're willing to do that. And then job skills training, and then possibly working if they're able to do that.
Okay.
So that's the purpose of the clearing of a camp. And then the other purpose that goes along with that, in these situations where the camp has become incredibly filthy, and I don't mean to be so graphic, but the human waste is unbelievable. And that waste is through vomiting as well as excrement. And you can walk through some of the sidewalks and the stench is sickening.
Most definitely. And I don't know how, it was a little while back, but in New York City, in their parks, they were concerned of the safety and the security of not just the homeless, but the community. How the sanitation of the homeless was not was not okay, and that they just needed to like sweep them away. And that's what I'm kind of thinking.
Well, we're not going. Well, I do not sense, feel, nor see that in Louisville, Kentucky, we're not sweeping anyone away. We are reaching out and embracing all of our brothers and sisters, and we're trying to do this in the most compassionate and caring and sensible way possible as we incorporate our medical community, our service providers, those that are providing food and clothing and job training. This will become, the poor shall always be with us. As I take us back to Scripture, they will always be with us. It's part of the Great Commission. And it's just a matter of what are we going to put in place to assist the poor who are with us. And so we do have a number of people in our community, and a lot of them, I'm sad to say, that call my office and say, as our council person, what are you going to do to get rid of those people? What are you going to do to clean that mess up? I'm coming into downtown Louisville, and every day I have to drive by it. And I always say, well, what would you like to do to help me? Because there are some wonderful people who just need a little extra attention to get them on their way. And last November, I received an email from a couple, and it said, Councilwoman, we live and work in your district, we own businesses in your district, and we saw that you're fighting for the surplus funding from Metro Louisville to be set aside for a pilot project for those experiencing homelessness. So we want to step up and help. What can we do? And I sent an email right back, and I said, your email came just in time. I received a phone call from an outreach worker that just called me and said, it's 10 o'clock at night, we've picked up a mother and her 2 children in the freezing cold out in South Louisville on a street corner because she has fled domestic violence. She needs a place to stay, and she's scared to report the abuser to the police, so therefore she can't check into a particular facility in our community if she's not willing to file the report. And I said, let me see what I can do. I sent the email and I said, are you all willing to help this young mother and her 2 children? And will you commit to a month, whatever that looks like? And they said yes. And so what that means, the outreach worker put the mother and the 2 children in the car, drove them straight into downtown Louisville, took them to Wayside, and they stayed there. And then we learned the next day the mother chose a different path, but guess what? There was another mom and dad and 2 more children that needed a place, and this couple took care of them for a month. All we need is every church in our community to step up and say, we're willing to do something a little different. And I'm asking you, will you become a room at the inn? And a room at the inn is a church that says, we'll be part of a network of churches that will house people overnight. And if we can get 15 churches to do that, that means once every 15 days, your church could be helping families who need help and a place to sleep and a hot meal and a caring church congregation. I don't care what your faith is. Let's do this for all of humanity.
All right. So before we go, this has been Matter of Interpretation with your teen host, Sydney Tucker, and God's grace plus our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Sydney.